bit, but welcome everyone to today's Q&A for Olympia. This is an invigorating documentary, I think, for these challenging times, gracing us as it does with the Olympic-sized spirit of its protagonist, which should be an inspiration to all of us. And no doubt, many of you gathered around the Zoom today are fans of the indomitable Olympia Dukakis, perhaps best known to us for her performance in Moonstruck, for which she won an Oscar. I am Carla Marcantonio. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Film, TV, and Media Studies, and I will be co-facilitating this event along with my colleague, Katerina Zacharia. Katerina.
Hello, Harry. Welcome to LMU. It gives me great joy to welcome Harry Mavromichalis, the director for the documentary Olympia, on this day that we celebrate the 200th anniversary of the Greek Revolution of 1821. The long, bloody struggle for independence from the Ottoman occupation of 1453 was fought by a brave people inspired by the European Enlightenment ideas, the dreams of a nation drafted by Greek intellectuals and European Philhellenes, following the examples of the 18th century revolutions against empires, most prominently the American and French revolutions. So on this important day for Greeks around the world, we are showcasing the work of Olympia Dukakis and my friend Harry Mavromichalis. Harry, it gives me great joy to introduce you to my university and my students, especially since the first time that you screened the film at the Los Angeles Greek Film Festival in 2019, it won the Orpheus Award for Best Documentary. Harry is a director, writer, and producer. He has dual citizenship from the US and Cyprus, and he worked at first professionally as a modern dancer and choreographer, and then received his master's in film directing from New York University, has done multiple short films, music videos, and commercials, and now he has another forthcoming documentary called Yankee Restrained.
My question to you is, did you already know Olympia and decided to make a documentary, or did you approach her with the idea that you wanted to get a documentary? And if so, how did you get her to agree?
I did know Olympia for a year before coming up with this idea. How I met Olympia, she was supposed to teach acting in our department, and I had signed up for her class. And a week before the class started, it was canceled. So I was devastated because Olympia has been my idol for years. And so I approached the head of the department at NYU, and I said, I'd like to reach out to Olympia and see if I could invite her to come to Cyprus, because at the time I had a production company where I would bring dance and theater shows to Cyprus. And I had just started organizing film workshops as well. And I was like, you know, if I can get her to Cyprus, then I can sit in the class. They put me in contact with her people, and 3 days later, she called me. We met for coffee, and I told her what I wanted to do. She said, I'm interested. So I went out to try and find funding. And a few months later, I told her that we're on. For a year, I got to know her. And on April of 2011, I was at the Tribeca Film Festival, and I was watching a documentary on Carol Channing. At the end of the documentary, I turned to my husband and I said, you know, like, someone needs to do a documentary about Olympia. And he said, well, why don't you do it? You're a filmmaker. I never wanted to be a documentary filmmaker. I was a really snotty graduate student at NYU. I thought that documentaries were beneath me. I did not take any of the documentary classes. The idea of doing a documentary was like foreign to me. The second backstory was that I had spent 3 years writing my first script, which was going to take place in Cyprus. I had just submitted it to the Ministry of Culture there for funding. And in 2011, the financial collapse happened and all the money froze. So I was left with nothing. And I started feeling suffocated, you know, artistically, creatively suffocating. This idea of getting a camera and sound, just two of us, that we can start a project, all of a sudden became, interesting to me, and I wanted to do it for that reason. So I thought about it. I thought, okay, this is a great idea. I don't need a lot of money to do this. This pattern of me being ignorant and naive is, you'll see, it played a big part in, my journey. But I thought it wasn't gonna cost a lot of money, which was true when we were filming. The money with the documentary comes later when you start editing, and it takes a lot more money than a narrative film. Yeah, so I got all excited about this idea. So I went to her apartment, and I remember the feeling. I was so excited to give her this news that we were going to do this, because I've already decided that she was going to love this idea. I told her, about my idea, and she said, "Oh God, Harry, no, I don't want to do a documentary." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And this is going to be like your legacy film, and people are going to know you. And she's like, "Harry, I'm not interested. I don't care." So for 3 months, every week, I would go and I would find a different reason why she should do it. And every time she was like, "Harry, I don't want to do this film. I don't want to do this film. Stop it." So 3 months later, I have made up my mind that it's not happening. So I was at her apartment again, and I got all emotional, and I was like, "Olympia, like, the only reason I want to do this is that if we do a documentary, then I'll be able to spend more time with you. And that's all I want." And she turned around like that and said, "Oh, I can do it for that." I was able to show vulnerability and figure out why I wanted to make this film. Everything changed.
What did she think of, what does she think of this documentary?
There was a lot of stress for the 7 years of filming, editing. There was a lot of expectations. So as you can imagine, we did a screening at her apartment. She invited 12 girlfriends of hers. So there was 13 women plus me, my editor, and my producer. The 4 of us were in the back, and the 13 women were in the front. And I was a wreck. And because you give your life to this project, and then what if she turns around and says, "What is this foolishness you you went out and did?" So we press play, and the film ends, and the people start clapping, and I'm like, "Oh, people liked it," and they start coming to me, and they congratulate me and start asking me questions. And all of a sudden I heard a voice, her voice going, "Where's Harry? Where's Harry?" And I waved at her, and she comes up to me, and she has tears in her eyes, and she said, "Oh my God, Harry, this is so beautiful." She says, "I don't know what I was expecting, but this is not it." And she said, "This film is about me, and even I wanted to know what was going to happen next." She said, and so it was great. It was like, and I, by the way, I just started crying. Like, I burst out crying, and I couldn't stop, like, because all that stress and insecurity just came out. And I was like, relieved, I was relieved.
And you spoke about editing a moment ago, and how you came to belatedly discover that it's actually expensive to do editing. But beyond the cost of editing, right? When you're doing a documentary, and certainly a documentary like this one, it is quite evident that you must have had a ton of footage. How did you make the decision about how you were going to organize the material and tell your story?
So we knew from the very beginning that we did not want to make a typical factual biodoc, she was born here, and then she did this and this and this. My goal was to, when somebody asked me at the very beginning, "What do you want from this?" I said, the only thing I know is I want to be able to showcase Olympia in the same way that I experience her essence. I want people to understand her essence. We have about 280 hours of footage, and I decided that I wanted to create scenes depending on the location and the theme. The fact that my editor was a first-time feature documentary editor, I was a first-time documentary director, so it was kind of like the blind leading the blind. But because we were we weren't going the conventional way. We had to basically create this by ourselves. There was the closest thing that existed at the time was the Joan Rivers documentary, which I took as inspiration of what I wanted to do. But we had to figure it all out.
So my question is, what was a challenge about documentary filmmaking that you encountered that you weren't expecting to?
The whole editing process was a nightmare. I thought, let me hire a really good editor. So I found an Emmy Award-winning editor, and we spoke, and I said, I want this like style of filmmaking. And he said, oh, yeah, I understand. Da, da, da. He had never done anything that was similar, but he said, I can do anything you want. After 7 months, he showed me the first 5 minutes of the cut of the film that he was doing. And it was basically a Ken Burns documentary, like factual, boring, and I was like, oh my God, no. But, I gave him feedback. He came back and said, I don't understand why you don't like it. Everyone on my office loves it. And I was like, well, I think we need to separate, to cut our, ties right here, because obviously we have two different visions for this film. So I wasted a lot of money and a lot of time. I mean, I fell into depression. Like, that moment was probably one of the darkest times of my life, where I was like, what am I going to do? So I found the editor of the Joan Rivers documentary, and I called her and I said, Penelope, I need help. You don't know me, but I'm doing this documentary on Olympia Dukakis, and your documentary is what I'm striving to, what do I need to do? This is what just happened. And he said, oh my God, Harry, no. He said, there's so many different styles of documentaries. You have to find an editor who, when you tell them that you have 280 hours, they get excited. If they say to you, oh God, really? You have that many hours? You don't want them. So your style of documentary is cinema verite. These are the people I think you should call. So she gave me some names. I called. They couldn't do it, but one of the people that the other people recommended to me ended up being my editor. And when I told him it was 280 hours, he's like, oh my God, that's great. And what do you have? And da, da, da. He was all excited about what we, because the excitement came from being in the editing room. No one told me that editors get paid, $2,000 to $10,000 a week. And when I asked Penelope, I said, how long did it take you to finish the Joan Rivers documentary? She said, about 13 months. Like, where am I going to find that money? So you start grant writing and Kickstarters and blah, blah, blah. It took 4 years. It took 4 years we kept, finding money, editing. It was a hard lesson. I wish I didn't have to go through it. I've learned so much because of that.
What would you do differently?
I mean, now I know to pick the right editor. Now I know how to edit. Like, I think, I've already shot my second documentary, and I feel a lot more confident about going into the editing room and going, let's do this. Like, already in my head, I'm seeing the film before we start editing. Like, back then it was like paint by numbers,
I was curious because you've talked about, having 280 hours of footage to go through, and you have like so many different facets of her life that you're just coming through in this film. And in each one, you managed to get the essence of who she is and like what she was trying to accomplish in every part of her life. That, to me, at least, seems like incredibly daunting. And I'm wondering if there was any point, either during the filming process or during the editing process, where it clicked and like the mists cleared and you felt like, this is how I want to tell this story.
It is daunting. If you try to think about how do I want this film to be, I think it would be easier if I just jump off the cliff. Like, I can't think like that because I don't know that end result. It would drive me insane. But if I can think of it as like building a house. Everything has to happen one by one. So every time I felt intimidated, like I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know what the end result is, it's like, okay, just calm down, focus on this scene. What do you want this scene to be like? And so once we had 15, 17, 20 scenes, then we were able to like start playing with them like a dance. What works? We had, our first viewable cut was 4 hours, 4 hours long, and with everything that I wanted, to be in there. And then you start trimming and cutting and what's working. That first scene with the Hollywood star, 3 months we were working on that scene. I called my one of my producers, my editors, and I said, Andrew, I don't want this scene. I don't want it in my film. I can't figure it out. And he said, listen, let's just try one more day. Let's just try it today. And then he gave us like some ideas. And then I went with the other editor and we worked it, and it just clicked. Like you said, like the mist cleared. We started with the humor, and then it's like this big event where she's getting the start, everybody's clapping. And then she tells us that it doesn't mean that much to her. Like that, that didn't come at the beginning. It took us forever to get there. Things take time. It's when we want to reach the end before we actually get to the end is when we get intimidated. And I'm guilty of that too. Like I constantly want things done. I want to get to the next place. So patience.
You presented your process to the students. And I always, when I teach, my students know at the beginning, they say, okay, so what's the structure? Where are we going? What are we doing? And I'm saying, have that period of doing what the Karate Kid is doing. You're going to wash a lot of windows. And when you're ready, there it is. You will know you have it and you will write your piece. But that's, I think what you're talking about is this, you're an artist. What an artist does, you film, and then the story presents itself to you when you're open. And you've got to have that kind of openness and fluidity to be able to let it speak to you and take the shape. If you knew in advance that I'm going to do A, B, C, D, then this is not breathing. It's a different kind of structure. And,
again, that was a really important reason why I wanted to make the film that I made. The struggle to get somewhere, which was parallel to my struggle to get this film, because 7 years of your life is a long time. I'm in my 9th year now and I'm still working on it. That's why I said earlier that it's important to just be patient and take it one step at a time, because the minute you want to reach the end point, before you get there, it's going to be overwhelming, and you'll want to quit no matter what it is, whether it's artistic or not, So you're right. It's one step at a time. I like the Karate Kid metaphor because it's true. You just like do these mundane things, and then all of a sudden it like, comes to life.
You spoke about already having a relationship with her. But as we can see in the film, she has a like really fiery personality. So I was wondering, was there any moment during the filming where you kind of overstepped the relationship and she turned that on you?
Oh, yes, of course. Oh my God. There's so much screaming that happened. Like, in Lennox, when she was rehearsing, where we see the rehearsals of King Lear. No, not King Lear. The Tempest. And she was trying to learn lines and get into the character, and there's the camera. We're like right there. There were so many times she was like, Harry, leave now. You gotta go. No, now. And like, we're like, okay, bye-bye. In LA with, she had the bruised eye and the broken hand, and she had just got into the accident, and they put her in the 3rd floor apartment, and the elevator wasn't working. And so she was injured, but having to go up and down, 2 floors. And at some point she was so stressed out and so angry that I started trying to, solve the problem. Like, Olympia, what do you need? Like, tell me, like, who I can help you. Like, and at some point she stops, like we're walking, and she stops and she goes, Harry, you don't understand. This is it's not up to me to find the solutions. They have to find the solution. Like, she just went off, and I was like, ah! And she screams, yells, and then like 2 minutes later we're laughing, and I loved it. I wish I had more.
When you were speaking to Olympia, did you notice that there was a struggle between two identities?
I think one of the things that attracted me to Olympia was that there is no two personas. There's just one. It's the Olympia who meets with, President Obama is the same Olympia that meets with Kitty. That was refreshing to me. And I think it made my life a little easier, because I don't know if I would have been interested in making a documentary if there was two personas.
And in general, what clues did she give, like visible or hidden, that there was a power to her personality and there's more to Olympia than first sight?
Well, she's pretty intimidating to begin with. Like, I think with Olympia is the opposite. Like, when you meet her, you are intimidated. And then what you realize is that there's a vulnerability to her. She can start crying like that about something that's, bothers her, or she gets emotional. I think the facade, because she's been a fighter since she was a young kid, being bullied in Lowell, Massachusetts, she created this facade of like, don't mess with me. It's pretty clear to everyone that she's fierce. But what we discover is the opposite. It's how vulnerable she is.
I was really struck by the ending of the documentary, right, with that beautiful image of the turtle going out to sea and then Olympia in that amphitheater. So did you always imagine that that's how your documentary would end, or how did you come up with that sort of very touching ending for the documentary?
For me, at some point it became really evident the relationship of the turtle towards the sea and Olympia towards the theater. Like, that's her destiny. The turtle goes into the sea, and Olympia instinctively, instead of going and standing in the middle of the theater, because if you go to an amphitheater, an ancient Greek amphitheater, the best place to be is in the center. That's where the acoustics happen. And so she did not go there. She went and she sat with the audience and looked to the stage. And so she, at that moment for me, it was like she becomes part of the theater. She's not bigger than theater. Her daughter and her granddaughters all rush to the center of the stage. And you see her just like walking a little bit and stopping and taking it in. It became easy. Like our subject, Olympia, helped us, with the editing. It was all there. We just had to like dig it up and find it.
I saw in your site that you posted a number of 1 minute or 2 minute interviews that are in addition and you didn't manage to get in. And one that I really thought that speaks to what you just said about her is where she's talking to, and I have it here, let's see, she's talking to Tina Packer, and she's saying why Greek drama is still relevant and interesting. And her reaction, apparently, when another of her actor friends approached her was, no, I don't want to do Greek drama, that patriarchal. And then she had a few expletives there. I don't want to do that. And then she started talking about Greek drama as if it's the deepest thing you can do, that talks about justice, that is relevant today. And I think her reaction to you was, I don't want to do that. There's no reason. And then when she sat with that actress and had lunch, then they decided they'll work together. So it's like, I think it's exactly what you're describing, is she wants to really be inspired and for the right reasons.
Yeah, and I think specifically she was talking about, what was it, Antigone or some tragedy where she felt...
Hecuba.
No, well, Hecuba is what she wanted to do. Mm-hmm. She didn't want to do the other play because
Sophocles.
Yes, exactly, because Clytemnestra was portrayed as the evil woman, and she wanted to do a play where the woman was powerful. She had, and chose to do Hecuba. But yeah, she's a deep thinker. Like I've never. I think she's one of the most intelligent people I've ever met, and and not only intelligent, but inquisitive and constantly searching, soul searching information. she never stops.
But I want to take you one scene back when she was talking about all this matriarchy, and she wanted to go to Greece and visited first the mothers and the fathers' village and sat with these old ladies. There is a moment there when she's sitting with the old ladies, and I see her daughter walking with the grandchildren to the car, and she says she had asked them before, do you know each other for a long time? You know, they've been here forever, they're friends, we could have been friends, this is their spot. And then she says, I have no place. I do not have a spot. And the
In
whole
New York.
documentary is about her not belonging, not knowing where to go. And she says, then I want to cry. So you see her, that moment of her becoming emotionally involved. But what I want to say about that last scene, yes, she's not going to the center, but you know where she goes and sits? At the seat of the priest of the community of Epidaurus, that is the priest of theater, essentially. So she's sitting with a sacred place of honor. Her connection, she knows where to sit. I mean, she knows that she belongs there in the end. She's most alive in her theater moments with all these actors. I mean, she's alive. Theater gave her the option to combat racism and, you know, sexism and everything in her life. And she opened her own theater. You don't want to give me that? I'm going to make it. And that's what I think it's a beautiful ending to the film for that as well. She's claiming her sacred spot.
To add to that, you know, apart from not having a place, not feeling like she belonged, there was always this effort trying to connect with other women. And in the 3 years that I filmed her, I never saw her go to someone to talk to, you know, because she's a celebrity. There's always like, you know, holding back. So at that moment, we were turning off our cameras because we had just been to the father's house, you know, and we were going to the car, and she saw these women and she just went there. And there was this need to connect with them. Yeah, it's like, I feel like the ending of the film has all the themes, and the rest of the film speaks. It's like, it kind of like, it all comes, you know, and they're there in Greece. It was a very magical experience, and I'm so blessed, and, you know, to have been able to capture that.
It's interesting that we're celebrating Greek Revolution. She had that rebellious spirit, but she had this disciplinary mother. When the mother says, I thought she was just an ordinary actress, it really struck me. She wouldn't allow her to be extraordinary, and then she was. And so can you speak to that relationship?
Well, that relationship was very complicated. You know, but it's from a very early age, from very young. Her mother knew that this little girl was a powerhouse, and that, you know, that got them very scared. You know, in the Greek family back then, women were the ones that were in danger to shame the family, you know, not the men. And so she had to make sure that Olympia was kept in her little box and, you know, not create any, not stir any waters. She even told her that she thought that Olympia couldn't make it in the show business because she wasn't pretty. But Olympia always like just laughed about it. She knew who she was from the very beginning. And there's a really interesting conversation with Tina Packer, you know, where she talks about how she feels like she was born with that like justice and like power to just keep moving. A lot of mothers who have daughters understand how complicated a mother-daughter relationship is, how multidimensional, and how problematic was at some point, how rewarding was later on. And even her mother was, you know, so there were so many elements. You know, she wanted Olympia to be serious, but her mother was a natural clown. She was funny. She would go to parties and they'd be like, oh my God, thank God, you know, Alec has walked in. Now we're going to have fun. The great thing with the two of them is that they kept at it till her death, till, her mother's death. They kept working in that relationship. And I think Olympia doesn't regret about anything. Everything about the Great Mother, she started speaking about the Great Mother, and I'm thinking, oh, maybe it's a play she's talking about. And then she's talking about history, and I'm like, what history? I've never heard of this before. As the years progressed and she would meet people, and we went to the Acropolis Museum in Athens, and then, with her friend, and they're like talking about specific statues and about Medusa, who was a Gorgon, who was the Great Mother. Like, she was a goddess, and then the Greeks took her and made her into a beast, the enemy, because she was a woman. I said, I want to know. So please just go along with it. Like, just talk about it more. And I would ask her questions. By the end, by the end of the 3 years, I was like, this needs to be heard, because I grew up in a society where boys were seen as first-class citizens and girls were seen as second-class citizens. I thought I was better than girls growing up, because that's how I was made to feel. And all of a sudden, you understand how society was built. And that was like, that was drilled into our brain, that that's our reality through religion, through society, family. All the walls that I had, all these like ideas came crumbling down, and I was like, I have to put this in the film. How do I do it? I don't understand it that well. Let me get a philosopher, with a PhD in philosophy, to try and help me. So I found this woman who was from France, and she looked at the footage and she's like, oh my God, Harry, it's wonderful. Are you actually thinking of like putting this in the film? And I was like, I want to, but if it's boring. My question to you, to all of you, is what was your reaction to the Great Mother and what that entailed?
I actually, in general, I enjoy the didactic aspects of all documentaries, more than just the person, right? Because it explains the culture that they are from, maybe even something that, I don't want to put it this way, but maybe Olympia is not even aware of it. And the fact that you brought it into the film, I find that like incredibly fascinating. And I don't just learn about Olympia, I learn about the culture of the Greeks as well and what they were thinking. So I think it's very important that we put the Great Mother in that context.
I'll just add, it colors her arrival in Greece, and it makes it a very sort of feminine, triumphant, because then she has a conversation with those old women there. And so as a transitional device from what we've seen and, en route to finishing in Greece, it colored my sort of perception of what that coming home was about. There was something about a feminine energy at the end that segment introduces.
I actually think that the best documentaries that I've engaged, right, and have invited me to engage, right, are the ones that helps me to come to a better way of knowing either a person or a subject, right, in a way that has qualities of being didactic, right, but not in your face kind of things, right? So the absolute beauty of this work, right? And the work is beautiful, Harry, and you are beautiful both in your person, but also in this passion that you have, not just for the documentary, right, but the subject of the documentary and the ways in which those have become somewhat seamless, right? And so I could look at the documentary, and then now I'm having this wonderful opportunity of engaging you, and they're not disconnected, right? It brings me actually deeper in the knowing, understanding aspects of your process, and I go, oh, that makes a lot of sense, right? What I love is that the documentary helps me to know her differently, right? Not just in that public persona, filmic kind of way, but it brings me, and it's intimate and invites me into a place that I go, oh, I love her even more, right? All of those aspects, even the not pretty parts, right? Is a way of coming to a deeper, more meaningful understanding of the person, the trials, the tribulations, the culture, the context, Hollywood, right? So there's so many things to come to know, right, that are sort of invested and embodied and emanates from her experience, and how you were able to manage to foreground some of that aspect, not to capture it, right, but to shine a light on some of the, what was the word earlier, the essences, right, of her being. You know, Katerina, when you mentioned the comment about the, that she knows where to sit, right, that's a very complex construct, right? Because I don't think that she's sitting at any moment in her life, right? She's not a woman who sort of waits for it to come to her, right? Or a woman who knows her place, right? So everything is instinctual and clearly in control of the moment, right? And so I think there's a social construction of a woman sitting, right, you know, in a kind of domestic kind of way, right? She's making some choices in that moment, right? And when she makes that choice, I'm like, oh, there it is. And she's drawn into that moment because of the same kind of instincts that have governed so many aspects of not just her career, right, but her life as a whole. And so I just love that moment. And I love that you said that, right? Because it forces us to think about choices and decisions, right? And where we put down our not just our butt, right? But our stakes in the ground. And it kind of reconfirms, you know, some of what I perceive, and maybe you could speak to this, Harry, but, you know, the integral choices that she's made in the sense of roles that she's played, positions that she's put herself in, right, in a way that have been so instinctual.
Everything was instinctual, everything. Yeah, there was nothing strategic in her life. It was all instinctual. And I think the reason why, you know, you spoke at the beginning about the connection between the filmmaker and is because we're similar in that we want the truth, we want the connection. We're not interested in the shiny things around us. We want to get real. And for me, you know, like the same way that she tried to, you know, commit suicide it wasn't just that once that she talks about the film, her addiction, her you know, struggle with depression for years spoke to me, because that's what I go through too, you know, like, because as an artist, you're constantly fighting, right? And you're trying to get your work to be seen and to be appreciated. It was all instinctual with Olympia, and that's why there was so much suffering.
I can't believe you even said the word I was about to bring in. Okay, so there is a moment where she talks about the mother, great mother, she calls, and she says, I want to celebrate her. And then she pauses and she says, I did not know how to celebrate her.
I don't know how to celebrate.
I know how to suffer.
Yeah.
And it's extraordinary that she says this herself, and then you ask her, and you ask her, do you have any regrets? And then she says, I didn't know how to put boundaries because I was so against boundaries. And I failed, essentially, she says she failed her daughter. And to me, it's extraordinary that always the opening, from this documentary, the opening of Olympia is her relationship to mother figure, Mother Earth, her daughter, the old ladies. So it's like something, I mean, she called her husband the person that helped her get her feelings back. Yeah. I'm thinking, wait, this woman has this, it's extraordinary. This, she learns how to suffer. It's always the women, always, and then she caused suffering, she feels, to her daughter.
When we screened in Cyprus in 2019, somebody asked, well, where's the father in all this? And I said, oh, the father was there. He just wasn't important for this story. This was a story of women. I could have given you some information about the father, but it just wasn't important enough for me, you know? So I chose to remove him from the picture because it is this matrilineal line. And it hurt me when Christina, her daughter, did not want to to participate in the film. So thankfully, she allowed us to use, the old footage. Olympia could talk about her. She was in Greece, so we could see her from behind. But I so desperately wanted to showcase that relationship because it was a very similar relationship that Olympia had with her mother. But alas, there was only so much I could do.
She's an icon for the LGBTQ community, and one of her best known roles, right, beyond the one that she won an Oscar for, Moonstruck, is this role of a trans character. And I was just curious to hear from you, right, what either your perception or even her perception might be about how that would be received in today's landscape. Did you get a chance to talk to Olympia about this generation?
Not really with Olympia, because Olympia doesn't get involved as political as she is in politics. For her, it's the character. So there was no discussion on that. But I did have a really in-depth conversation with Alan Poole, who's the producer of Tales of the City. And he did tell me that there was a very in-depth discussion about, because nowadays they want to, we want to have a trans person playing a trans character. What do we do now? Since Olympia had 3 seasons, 92 and early 2000s, what happens? And he said it was intense. At the end, they came to the conclusion that this is her part because of the history. Carla, you said about Tales of the City and having Olympia, who's a straight actress, play a trans character. I see this film and I'm thinking, does that not make me eligible to make a film about women and feminism because I'm a gay man? And my first experience to that was when I went many years ago to watch Martha Graham, the dance company in New York, and they were doing all this Greek dance. And I remember saying, I have never seen anything look more Greek than this. And this woman is not Greek. How is that possible? I had that thought. We're in a place in society where it is vital that we support marginalized communities. Yes, if it's a trans character, a trans person should do it. We have to do that. But I think eventually we have to do that. So eventually we can get to a point where anyone can do anything. And, and you just find the right person to do that part.
I think that one part you said about how we should get to a point where people can play the different roles. It reminds me of probably the most popular Greek movie in history, Zorba the Greek. I believe the main character is actually Mexican, and he tried to portray a Greek man. It was done so well.
I'm shocked that you know of the film.
She took my
Katerina.
cinema class. She took my Greek cinema class.
I also want to comment on that aspect where you're talking about empathy and the human connection. And I think it's, even in this pandemic, it's where we don't see people face to face. When we see and learn from people like Olympia, it fills that void of personal connection that we don't have now. And we're learning from someone with a positive influence. And she's a very complex, high-dimensional character. And these are people we should understand and look up to.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know about looking up to other than examining and analyzing and trying to find things that it's being inspired by. We were supposed to come out in theaters in March of 2020, and then COVID happened and we pushed our release in July, and that it was heartbreaking when everything was canceled, because I wanted to be able to go in theaters with people and have that shared experience. So what we're doing now, it's basically that. we come together and you share your experience with me, and I really, really appreciate that. It means so much. I have to tell you, like this, I don't even want to call it Q&A. I want to say like this therapy session has been incredible. Like I'm so happy, and like my batteries are like fully charged after spending an hour with you guys.
And for you, I think you're speaking to the students in ways that maybe you're not aware of, but this is the challenge for students: is how do I write a paper? How do I learn how to write a screenplay? Now, why is it not breathing? Okay, why did I get a C? And why why is my film not doing well? So you are doing a service for us coming here and speaking to the students for that reason.
Once we get past this sort of COVID moment, right, we might want to look for other opportunities, Harry, right, where we could bring students, faculty, and our community together around this or emerging projects. So let's just keep a space open, right, for future possibilities. A connection to the School of Film and Television, a connection to the Bellarmine College of Liberal Arts and to the College of Communication and Fine Arts.